In the vast expanse of the Milky Way, the Galactic Council had successfully integrated over 300 species into their bureaucratic embrace without major incident. Their procedure was immaculate. Identify a pre-warp civilization, observe until technological capability reached sufficient levels, then make peaceful contact with a standardized greeting and a gift basket of advanced technologies. Simple, elegant, and followed to the letter for 12,000 cycles. Then they met humans. Species 301 shows remarkable adaptability and resource utilization, despite their primitive technology, read Ambassador Thrix as he prepared for Earth's first contact ceremony. His iridescent scales shimmered with anticipation as he adjusted his translator. Approach with Standard Protocol 7b. Thrix had successfully introduced 17 other species to the Galactic Council. His credentials were impeccable, his demeanor perfectly calibrated for inspiring awe without triggering primitive fear responses. He was, by all council metrics, the ideal first contact specialist. "Let's just get this over with," he muttered to his assistant, Plex. "Another backwater planet of wide-eyed primitives grateful for our benevolence. I've got dinner reservations on Centauri Prime tonight." The council ship descended toward the designated landing zone in what humans called Geneva, decloaking with a spectacular light show designed to awe without terrifying. Ambassador Thrix emerged in his ceremonial robes, mandibles polished to a perfect shine. The human delegation waited below, faces unreadable. This should have been Thrix's first warning. "Greetings, primitives of Earth," Thrix announced through his translator. "The Galactic Council has deemed your species worthy of acknowledgement. We come bearing gifts of knowledge and technology to elevate your existence." The human representative, a woman with short grey hair and a stern expression, raised an eyebrow. "Primitives." Thrix continued unperturbed. "We have observed your quaint struggles and determined you require our guidance. As is customary, we will accept your planet's most valuable natural resources as a token of appreciation." The human delegation exchanged glances. "Ambassador," the woman said carefully, "I'm President Ortega of the United Nations Earth Coalition. We appreciate your visit, but we don't typically respond well to being called primitives or having our resources claimed as payment." Thrix blinked his three eyes in confusion. This deviation from the script was unprecedented. "You misunderstand. This is an honor. A species weep with gratitude at this point." President Ortega smiled thinly. "We're not most species." Thrix, attempting to salvage the situation, moved to Plan B, the traditional gift offering. He gestured to Plex, who brought forward an ornate container. "We present you with the Council's standard welcoming package, a small antimatter reactor, blueprints for basic gravity manipulation, and a complimentary membership to the Galactic Trade Network Bronze Tier, of course." He opened the container with a flourish. President Ortega peered inside, then looked up with that same unsettling smile. "Ambassador Thrix, we've already developed antimatter containment, and while we appreciate the gravity tech, we must decline any arrangement that classifies Earth as Bronze Tier anything." Thrix's scales flattened in alarm. "But this is unprecedented. The gift package is non-negotiable." "So is our sovereignty," replied Ortega. "Perhaps we should discuss terms as equals." The word equals sent Thrix into a diplomatic tailspin. Nothing in his 12,000 years of protocol covered this scenario. In his confusion, he made his fatal error. "Perhaps your primitive brains cannot comprehend the honor being bestowed upon you," he said, mandibles clicking in agitation. "We expected simple gratitude, not negotiation." The temperature seemed to drop several degrees as President Ortega's smile vanished. "Ambassador," she said coldly, "I suggest you return to your ship, contact your superiors, and reconsider your approach. When you're ready to speak to us without condescension, we'll be here." And with that, the human delegation turned and walked away, the ultimate insult in Thrix's culture. Back on the ship, Thrix was hyperventilating. They walked away. No species has ever walked away. This is catastrophic. X, ever practical, was already composing the incident report. "Sir, perhaps we should consult the council before." "No, Thrix hissed. We can fix this. Standard Protocol 12, overwhelming technological demonstration. Which is how, 16 hours later, the Council's finest diplomatic vessel ended up with its engines disabled by a primitive Earth EMP device, floating helplessly over Geneva Lake, while tourists took selfies with it in the background. First contact was officially a disaster. The Council, not accustomed to failure, responded as bureaucracies throughout the universe typically do by throwing more resources at the problem while denying any fundamental issues with their approach. Enter Neven, a mid-level bureaucrat with unfortunate timing who happened to be passing High Chancellor Vex's office just as the news of Thrix's debacle reached Council headquarters. You, whatever your name is. Vex had bellowed, tentacles writhing in agitation. You've just been promoted to Special Envoy for Terrestrial Relations. Fix this mess. Neven, a slender, blue-skinned humanoid with large, perpetually worried eyes, was not built for crisis management. His previous job had involved cataloging the mating rituals of non-sentient species for the Council's biological database. He had never even met a human. But High Chancellor, Neven had protested weakly. I have no diplomatic experience. Perfect. Vex had exclaimed. Experience clearly doesn't work with these humans. We need fresh thinking. You have 3 cycles to prepare. Don't embarrass us further. 3 cycles later, Neven found himself approaching Earth in what the Council considered an appropriately humble vessel, merely the size of what humans called a cruise ship rather than the usual but city-sized diplomatic carriers. Remember the briefing. Neven muttered to himself as he prepared to transport down. No calling them primitives. No assumptions of superiority. Bring coffee as a gesture of goodwill. His research team had identified this bitter earth beverage as nearly sacred to humans. Surely this would smooth things over. The transport beam deposited him in the same Geneva location. The human delegation, now expanded to include military personnel, watched warily as Neven approached with a container of what he believed to be premium coffee. Greetings, esteemed humans, he began nervously. I come bearing apologies for Ambassador Thrix's behavior and this peace offering of your cherished coffee substance. President Ortega stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. Thank you, Ambassador. Special Envoy Neven, actually. I'm not important enough to be an ambassador. He realized immediately this wasn't the power move he'd intended. Ortega accepted the container and opened it. Her eyebrows shot up. These are coffee beans. Raw, unroasted coffee beans. Neven nodded eagerly. Yes, 17 tons of them. A generous offering, yes? You brought us 17 tons of raw coffee beans, and a military officer in the background stifled what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Is that insufficient? Neven's large eyes blinked rapidly. President Ortega cleared her throat. It's not about quantity, Envoy Neven. These need to be roasted, ground and brewed to be consumed. Did your research not mention this? Neven felt his career imploding. The cultural database mentioned only that humans value coffee highly. The preparation details must have been in the appendices. Another diplomatic disaster was unfolding, but something unexpected happened. President Ortega laughed not mockingly, but with genuine amusement. Well, Envoy Neven, it seems we both have much to learn about each other. Why don't we go somewhere and I'll show you how humans actually drink coffee? This unscripted development threw the Council's remote observation team into chaos. Fraternization outside protocol. Cultural exchange initiated by the primitives, the humans. Unthinkable. But Neven, seeing his first opening, seized it with the desperation of someone whose alternative was explaining 17 tons of wasted coffee beans to High Chancellor Vex. Over the following weeks, the Council sent 3 more diplomatic missions, each ending more bizarrely than the last. The Technological Exchange Delegation, who discovered too late that offering humans weapons technology in exchange for streaming rights to their entertainment channels was not, in fact, seen as a fair trade. The Cultural Assessment Team, who made the mistake of suggesting human art was charmingly simplistic, only to be subjected to a 90-minute lecture on Renaissance masters by an increasingly animated museum curator. And finally, the security cooperation envoy, who, attempting to demonstrate good faith, that revealed the locations of all Council observation posts on Earth only to discover that humans had already identified 80% of them. Yes, were using several as impromptu tourist attractions. Each mission reported the same disturbing conclusion: humans didn't follow the script. Worse, they seemed to enjoy going off script, displaying an adaptability that the Council's rigid protocols simply couldn't accommodate. Back at headquarters, even now unofficially the Council's human expert by virtue of having shared coffee with President Ortega, tried desperately to convey this understanding. "They don't respond to our standard approaches," he explained to a room of skeptical Council officials. "They improvise. They question. They make jokes about serious matters." "Jokes," repeated Councillor Drex, a gaseous entity contained in an environmental suit. "During first contact negotiations? And preposterous." "With respect, Councillor," Neven replied, "that's exactly what makes them different and potentially valuable." The word valuable silenced the room. The Council understood value. Commander Drell of the Council Defense Force had seen many species across his 500-year career. As head of threat assessment, he had categorized most newcomers within minutes of observation. Humans, however, defied his classification system entirely. That recording again, he ordered his assistant during their third review session of Earth's military capabilities. The holographic display showed a human military exercise, soldiers crossing an obstacle course carrying heavy packs in what humans called rain. "Notice how they continue despite adverse conditions," Drell observed, his four eyes narrowed in concentration. "Most species would seek shelter or deploy environmental shields." "Inefficient," his assistant noted. "You're adaptable," Drell countered. "They train in hardship deliberately." The next footage showed human negotiators at a trade conference with the Crixian delegation, a minor council race known for their mathematical precision and uncompromising bargaining tactics. The humans were smiling, making small talk, offering concessions on minor points while subtly steering toward their primary objectives. "Freeze there," Drell commanded. "See that? The human just made a self-deprecating statement that caused the Crixian to relax their posture. They're using humor as a tactical advantage. Psychological manipulation," the assistant suggested. "Relationship building," Drell corrected. "And they're extraordinarily good at it." The more Drell observed, the more fascinated he became. Humans displayed contradictory traits that, by Council standards, shouldn't coexist in a functional species. They were individually competitive yet capable of remarkable cooperation. They formed emotional attachments that seemed to hinder efficiency, yet somehow enhanced their performance in crisis situations. Most disturbingly, they adapted to new information with alarming speed. When the Council had accidentally revealed the existence of faster-than-light communication, most species took decades to reverse engineer the technology. Humans had working prototypes within months. When a junior diplomat had mentioned the Council's difficulty with certain protein-based pathogens, Earth scientists had submitted 3 possible solutions before the Council had even formally acknowledged the problem existed. "They don't think like we do," Drell explained during an emergency briefing. "Our step-by-step logical progression is not their way. They leap." High Councillor Vex's skin flushed a distinct orange of concern. "Are you suggesting they pose a threat, Commander?" Drell chose his words carefully. "I am suggesting that our standard evaluations are insufficient. They are neither a threat nor an asset in conventional terms. They are wildcards." The diplomatic tensions came to a head during what would later be known as the Geneva Incident. The Council, still operating under the assumption that standard protocols would eventually work, had sent their most decorated diplomatic team with a comprehensive proposal for Earth's integration into galactic society. The proposal included technological exchanges, cultural preservation zones, and limited representation in minor council subcommittee standard fare for new species. Ambassador Rodriguez, Earth's newly appointed representative to extraterrestrial affairs and a woman with an impressive poker face, listened patiently to the 3-hour presentation. When the council diplomats finished, she smiled politely and pushed the stack of treaties aside. "Thank you for your thorough proposal," she said. "Now let me tell you what Earth is actually willing to accept." What followed was diplomatic heresy. Rodriguez outlined terms that included immediate full council membership, unrestricted technology exchange, and most shocking of all, veto powers on issues affecting Earth's solar system. The lead council diplomat, a venerable Thraxian named Gore, actually shed his ceremonial skin covering in shock, the equivalent of a human diplomat suddenly dropping their pants in the middle of negotiations. Preposterous. Gore sputtered, his replacement skin covering hastily applied by aides. No species has ever demanded such terms upon first admission. Rodriguez leaned forward. No species has ever had to remind the council 3 times not to call them primitives. We're starting as we mean to go on. These demands are not just unprecedented, they're impossible, Gore insisted. The council would never agree. Then perhaps, Rodriguez suggested mildly, the council should consider why Earth is worth making exceptions for. And then she did something truly unprecedented in galactic diplomatic history. She presented a gift to the council delegation. A small, innocuous data crystal. "What is this?" Gore asked suspiciously. "Just some light reading," Rodriguez replied. "Our preliminary solutions to the Corellian mathematical anomalies. You know, the ones your mathematicians have been stuck on for the past 3 centuries. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." The diplomatic team returned to council space in a state of shock. Verification of the data crystal's contents confirmed thinkable humans had indeed solved mathematical problems that had stumped the council's finest minds for generations. And they'd done it with what they called a weekend hackathon fueled by pizza and energy drinks. The council was officially in crisis mode. The Grand Council Chamber, a vast amphitheater that had hosted 12,000 years of orderly galactic governance, had never witnessed such chaos. Representatives from all 300 member species filled the space with a cacophony of concerned voices, tentacle waving, and alarmed pheromone releases. High Councillor Vex, attempting to restore order by pounding his ceremonial gravity hammer, but only succeeded in breaking another section of the ancient speaking platform, the third such damage this session. Silence. He finally roared, his voice amplified to painful levels, the chamber grudgingly quieted. "We face an unprecedented situation," Vex continued, his 7 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme stress. "The humans have disrupted every standard protocol, violated every diplomatic norm, and somehow made us look like the unreasonable ones. They should be quarantined," shouted a representative from the crystalline Sidar collective. "Any species this unpredictable is clearly a danger. They solved the Corellian anomalies," countered a Medusan scientist, his brain visible through his transparent skull case. "We need their cognitive capabilities." The debate raged for hours, with factions quickly forming, those who feared humanity, those who saw opportunity in their unusual abilities, and a surprising number who simply found humans entertaining a concept previously unknown in council politics. Throughout the chaos, Neven sat quietly in his newly assigned seat, acting special coordinator for terrestrial affairs. A title hastily created to give him access to the emergency session. He had spent more time with humans than anyone else in the chamber. And what he was hearing confirmed his suspicions. The council fundamentally misunderstood what they were dealing with. When finally recognized to speak, Neven approached the podium with uncharacteristic confidence. "Esteemed councillors," he began, "we're asking the wrong questions. It's not about whether humans are a threat or an asset. It's about understanding why our approaches keep failing." He activated the holographic display, showing footage from each diplomatic disaster. Notice the pattern. In each case, we assumed humans would react like every other species we've encountered. They didn't. We assumed they would be grateful for our attention. They weren't. We assumed they would accept their place in the hierarchy. They refused. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. "But here's what we've missed," Neven continued. "Humans aren't being deliberately difficult. They simply have different fundamental assumptions about how relationships, including diplomatic ones, should work." High Councillor Vex leaned forward. "Explain." "Humans expect reciprocity. They expect to be treated as equals regardless of technological development. And most importantly, Neven paused for emphasis, they respond extraordinarily well to genuine apology when mistakes are made. Apology, Vex repeated, as if the word were foreign, for following our standard protocols. Yes, Neven confirmed. Our protocols were developed for species that respond to hierarchy and authority. Humans respond to respect and authenticity. The concept was so alien that several council members required translation clarification. Into this confusion stepped Councillor Maya of the Empathic Consortium, a species known for their emotional intelligence rather than technological prowess. I believe I understand, she said, her voice melodious. Humans don't just want our technology or our protection. They want to be truly seen as valuable contributors from the beginning. Precisely, Neven agreed. And when we fail to do this, which we have repeatedly, they require genuine acknowledgement of the mistake. The High Councillor Vex's skin shifted through several colors as he processed this information. Are you suggesting we should apologize to a newly discovered species for following procedures that have worked flawlessly for 12 millennia? Yes, Neven said simply. And not just once. We're going to need to apologize a lot as we learn to work with them. The chamber erupted again, the very concept challenging the Council's foundation of authoritative wisdom. For hours, proposals flew back and forth, growing increasingly complex and bureaucratic. Finally, exhausted and faced with growing evidence that humans would neither go away nor conform to expectations, High Councillor Vex made a decision that would change galactic politics forever. By executive order, I hereby establish the Department of Terrestrial Reconciliation and Apology, he announced. This department will be solely dedicated to understanding human expectations, formulating appropriate apologies when those expectations are violated, and developing new protocols for human interaction. The announcement was met with stunned silence, followed by hesitant applause from those who recognized the unprecedented nature of the solution. Never before had the Council created an entire department dedicated to a single species, much less one focused on apologizing to them. And who, asked a skeptical councillor from the back, will head this unusual department? All 14 of Vex's eye stalks swiveled toward Neven, who suddenly wished he had called in sick that day. Our resident human expert, of course, Vex declared, Special Director Neven, effective immediately. And thus, with a stroke of bureaucratic inspiration, the Council created its most unusual department, one that would ultimately change the power balance of the entire galaxy. The Department of Terrestrial Reconciliation and Apology, DTRA, began with 3 employees, a converted storage closet for an office, and a mandate that no one quite understood how to fulfill. 6 months later, it occupied an entire tower in the Council administrative complex, employed over 200 specialists, and had its own emergency response fleet. Such was the nature of human interactions. We need another apology draft for the agricultural exchange incident. Neven called across the department's crisis center to his assistant, a former poet from the melodic spheres who had proven surprisingly adept at crafting apologies that humans found sincere. Which one? The assistant called back. The autonomous harvester that achieved sentience and applied for asylum, or the soil bacteria that turned the test field's vegetation blue? Both, Neven sighed, and add the translation error that led their delegate to believe we were gifting them a small moon instead of moon-shaped commemorative paperweights. The department's early efforts had been plagued by well-intentioned disasters. Standard Council gift-giving protocols proved particularly problematic, as did technology transfers, cultural exchanges, and pretty much any interaction lasting longer than 5 minutes. Yet something unexpected had emerged from these chaotic beginnings. Humans, it turned out, were remarkably forgiving once they received a genuine apology. More surprisingly, they seemed to enjoy the process of working through misunderstandings, finding it all vaguely entertaining. The breakthrough came during Neven's 3rd meeting with Ambassador Rodriguez, now a regular contact as Earth established its unusual relationship with the Council. You know, Rodriguez had remarked while sipping properly prepared coffee, Neven had finally mastered the brewing process. What I appreciate about you, Neven, It is that you actually try to understand us rather than just fitting us into your existing frameworks. Neven had blinked in surprise. I don't have much choice. You humans don't fit our frameworks. Rodriguez had laughed. Exactly. And that's our greatest strength. We keep you on your toes. This candid conversation led to a radical approach. The DTRA began inviting human consultants to help design protocols for human council interactions. The result was diplomatic harmony, unlike anything previously achieved with a new species. Human creativity paired with council resources proved a formidable combination. Joint ventures in science, art, and commerce flourished. The DTRA's role expanded from damage control to facilitating unprecedented collaboration. Not everyone appreciated this success. Traditional council factions watched with alarm as humans gained influence without following the established path of centuries-long integration. "They're exploiting our accommodation," complained Councillor Drex during a closed session. "Every apology strengthens their position." "They're teaching us flexibility," countered Councillor Meyer, "something this body has lacked for millennia." Both were right. Humans leverage their unique position to gain technological advancements that would normally take centuries to earn. Yet they also shared innovations freely, introducing concepts that benefited the entire galactic community. The DTRA found itself walking an increasingly complex diplomatic tightrope. Neven, once a forgettable bureaucrat, had become one of the most influential figures in council politics, the interface between human unpredictability and council order. The relationship reached its defining moment during the Proxima Centauri crisis. A routine territorial dispute escalated when a powerful council member claimed rights to a star system on the edge of human space. Standard council procedure would have granted the claim without question, as the more established species always receive precedence. The humans refused to accept this. For the first time, the DTRA found itself unable to craft an apology because this time, humans weren't seeking one. They were demanding equal treatment under council law. The resulting diplomatic standoff threatened to undo years of progress. Council chambers echoed with debates about precedent and stability versus fairness and innovation. The galaxy watched, holding its collective breath. In a private meeting that would later become legendary in diplomatic circles, Neven and Ambassador Rodriguez sat across from each other, the weight of potential conflict heavy between them. "Your council wants us to apologize for demanding equal rights," Rodriguez said quietly. "That's one apology you'll never receive." Neven nodded slowly. "And the traditional council factions want humans to apologize for disrupting 12,000 years of protocol. That's one apology you'll never give." They stared at each other in silence before both simultaneously broke into smiles. "So," Rodriguez said, "we need a third option that lets everyone save face." "A very human solution," Neven agreed. Together, they drafted what would become known as the Proxima Compromise, a revolutionary document that preserved council authority while creating mechanisms for newer species to challenge traditions through demonstrated merit rather than mere longevity. It was neither what the council wanted nor what Earth had demanded. It was something new and better than either side could have created alone. 5 years after first contact, the Galactic Council held its 10,000th centennial celebration, a grand affair showcasing the stability and wisdom of galactic governance. For the first time in council history, a newly admitted species was invited to give the keynote address. As Ambassador Rodriguez approached the ancient speaking platform, reinforced after High Councillor Vex's previous mishaps, the assembled representatives of 300 species fell to silent. She carried no notes, no translator, addressing the council in flawless standard galactic, a language humans had mastered with characteristic speed. "Distinguished representatives," she began, "5 years ago, our species was unknown to you. Today we stand before you as partners in the greatest diplomatic experiment the galaxy has ever known." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Department of Terrestrial Reconciliation and Apology was created because humans didn't fit your expectations. What began as damage control has evolved into something far more valuable, a bridge between different ways of thinking. From his seat beside High Councillor Vex, Neven, now holding the unprecedented position of cross-species integration director, nodded in quiet satisfaction. "We have challenged your assumptions," Rodriguez continued, "questioned your traditions, and occasionally driven your bureaucrats to the brink of nervous breakdowns." This earned appreciative laughter, a sound once rare in council proceedings. "But through it all, we have learned from each other." She gestured to the chamber around her. "Look at what we've accomplished together. Diplomatic protocols that emphasize understanding rather than mere compliance. Scientific collaboration that values intuitive leaps alongside methodical progress. A council that has remembered how to adapt." The truth of her words was evident throughout the governing body. The rigid hierarchy that had dominated for millennia had given way to a more dynamic, responsive system. Species that had silently accepted their designated roles for centuries now found their voices, inspired by humanity's example. "The Department of Apologies was created because we were different," Rodriguez concluded. "It remains because that difference has value, not just for humans, but for every species seeking a place in this grand community." The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was genuine, echoing through chambers that had once valued decorum over emotion. As the formal proceedings concluded, the true significance of the change was most evident in the reception that followed. Where species had once clustered in strict hierarchical groupings, the gathering now flowed with cross-species mingling. Ideas were exchanged freely, cultural barriers bridged with newfound enthusiasm. "I still can't believe it sometimes," Neven confessed to Rodriguez as they watched the unprecedented social mixing. "Right from diplomatic disasters to this in just 5 years." "Humans are good at relationship speedruns," Rodriguez replied with a wink. "Why take centuries when you can just apologize for the awkward bits and move forward?" Across the room, Commander Drell was engaged in animated conversation with Earth's military attaché, both clearly enjoying their discussion of tactical innovations. Nearby, a group of council scientists huddled around a human engineer as she sketched a concept on a napkin, their expressions showing the now familiar mixture of confusion and inspiration that human ideas typically generated. "You know," Neven observed, "the department has processed 1,247 official apologies in 5 years. That must be some kind of record." "Tu peux. Guillemont. Thou. And how many times have we apologized to you?" Rodriguez asked with a knowing smile. Neven paused, realizing the truth. "Not once." "Is it?" "Exactly. Because you actually tried to understand us instead of just expecting us to understand you. That's the real lesson here, one the Council is finally learning." As if to underscore her point, High Councillor Vex approached, his ceremonial robes replaced with a more practical Earth-inspired design that had become fashionable among younger council members. "Director Neven, Ambassador Rodriguez," he greeted them warmly. "I've just signed the authorization to expand the department's mandate. The success with humans has convinced us that all species could benefit from this approach." "You're creating departments of apology for every species?" Neven asked, bewildered. "No," Vex replied with newfound wisdom. "We're integrating your methods throughout council diplomacy. The Department of Terrestrial Reconciliation and Apology is being promoted to oversee all cross-species integration." Rodriguez's eyes widened. "That's a lot of influence for Earth." "Indeed," Vex agreed. "And well earned. Your species has taught us that strength comes not from rigid adherence to tradition, but from the ability to acknowledge mistakes and adapt accordingly." As Vex departed, Neven turned to Rodriguez with an expression of stunned realization. "Do you understand what just happened? They've essentially given Earth control over all new species integration. That's unprecedented power for a newcomer species." Rodriguez nodded, her expression thoughtful. "All because you created a department to apologize to us." "The greatest diplomatic success story in council history," Neven mused, "born from our greatest diplomatic failure." "There's a very human lesson in that," Rodriguez replied. "Sometimes you have to get things spectacularly wrong before you can get them right." As they raised their glasses in toast, neither could fully appreciate the transformative waves their partnership had set in motion throughout the galaxy. The department that had begun as an embarrassing necessity had become Earth's greatest asset and the Council's salvation from 12,000 years of stagnation. Across the stars, species that had once accepted their designated place in the cosmic hierarchy looked toward Earth with newfound hope. The message was clear. In a galaxy of ancient powers, sometimes the newest voice speaks the oldest wisdom. Sometimes all it takes is knowing when to say you're sorry,